The auction block stood tall and black against the Louisiana sun, its wood worn smooth by countless desperate souls who'd passed through. Eliza Hawthorne's wrists burned against the rough hemp rope as she tried not to tremble. At 17, she had prepared herself for this moment since her master's death 3 days ago, but nothing could truly ready a person for being sold like livestock. The crowd below murmured appraising words as if she weren't even human. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The girl's strong, good for field work, someone shouted. And from the back, pretty enough to fetch a higher price for indoor services, another added, his leering tone making Eliza's stomach turn. The auctioneer, a portly man with sweat beading on his forehead, raised his gavel. Ladies and gentlemen, we have here a fine young woman, trained in domestic duties, literate and healthy. Starting bid at $50. Eliza scanned the crowd, desperately looking for any sign of mercy. Men of all ages and backgrounds stood around the platform, plantation owners in their finest coats, merchants calculating profits, and rougher men whose intentions were clearly more sinister. Some she recognized from neighboring estates, others were strangers drawn to New Orleans by the promise of cheap labor and other vices. 60, called out Marcus Whitmore, a known cruel master whose slaves whispered stories of horror. Eliza felt her heart begin to race. Not him, anyone but him. 75, another voice rang out from a younger plantation heir known for his gambling debts. He'd be looking for quick profits, which meant a swift resale to the highest bidder. The bidding continued climbing, each number feeling like another nail in the coffin of her hopes. 100, 150. The men bid casually, as if discussing the price of sugar or cotton, not a human life. Eliza tried to maintain her dignity, holding her head high even as tears threatened to spill down her cheeks. Her mother had taught her that lesson. Dignity was the one thing they couldn't take from you unless you surrendered it. 200! Whitmore's voice boomed, and several bidders dropped out, recognizing his determination. The man's eyes gleamed with something dark as he stared up at her. Eliza had heard the stories about what happened to the young women he bought. None of them lasted long on his plantation, either sold away quickly or worse. 225! The auctioneer's assistant called out from the side, acting on behalf of a wealthy widow who needed house slaves. That might be tolerable, Eliza thought desperately. At least in a house there might be some protection, some small comfort. 250, 275. The bids slowed as the price climbed higher. Whitmore seemed determined to claim her, his hand raising confidently with each counterbid. Just when it seemed the auction would close at $300, a new voice cut through the humid air. $500. The crowd turned as one, murmuring in surprise at the dramatic jump in price. A tall figure pushed through the gathered men, his wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. He wore the worn leather and denim of a cowboy, but there was something different about him. His boots were finer than most drifters wore, his weapon belt well-maintained, and his bearing suggested someone used to command. $500, he repeated, his voice steady and deep. Cash. The auctioneer's eyes widened at the unprecedented. Outbid. 500 was nearly double the usual price for even the most desirable slave. Eliza studied the mysterious bidder, trying to understand his intentions. His face remained largely hidden beneath the shadow of his hat, but she caught glimpses of weathered skin and a strong jaw. There was something in his stance that seemed different from the other buyers, less predatory, more purposeful. Sir, that's a generous bid. Are you certain? The auctioneer seemed almost reluctant to accept such a high offer, perhaps hoping to drive the price even higher now that blood was in the water. I said 500. Do I hear any other bids? The cowboy's question was direct. almost challenging. Whitmore sputtered, clearly caught off guard. 550, he counted desperately, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. That kind of money could buy several slaves or settle gambling debts. $1,000. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Such a sum was unheard of for a single slave, no matter how skilled or attractive. Even the auctioneer stood speechless for a moment, his gavel frozen mid-air. Eliza's own eyes widened in shock. What kind of man would spend such a fortune? Whitmore's face reddened with rage, but he knew he was beaten. No one in their right mind would bid higher. The other potential buyers stepped back, recognizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The mysterious cowboy had effectively ended the auction with a single bid. Going once, going twice. The auctioneer's voice trembled. With excitement, this would be the highest sale of his career, sold to the gentleman for $1,000. The crowd erupted in conversation, everyone speculating about the identity and intentions of the mysterious buyer. Eliza felt oddly detached from the moment, as if watching from outside her own body. She had been purchased for a fortune, but by a stranger whose motives remained completely unknown. Was he actually merciful, or was this just another form of cruelty? A man who could afford to pay so much likely had very specific and possibly twisted intentions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The cowboy approached the platform as the auctioneer's assistant hurried to complete the transaction. Eliza caught her first clear look at her new master as he removed his hat to count out the bills. His hair was dark, shot through with premature silver at the temples. His face was handsome in a rugged way, marked by sun and wind rather than the soft features of pampered plantation owners. Most striking were his eyes, a startling blue-gray that held an intensity she couldn't interpret. "The papers?" he asked the auctioneer, his voice businesslike. "Right here, sir. Just need you to sign here. And here." The auctioneer bustled about importantly, clearly eager to please such a wealthy customer. "Where shall we arrange delivery of your property?" Property. The word stung, even though Eliza had heard it countless times before. She watched the cowboy sign the documents with confident strokes, legally binding her to him. "I'll take her now," he said simply, pocketing the papers. The auctioneer's assistant unbound Eliza's wrists and led her down the wooden steps. Her legs shook slightly, whether from fear or the strain of standing so long she couldn't tell. The cowboy stood at the base of the platform, waiting patiently. Up close, he seemed even taller, his presence commanding despite the casual way he wore his trail-worn clothes. "Can you ride?" he asked quietly, his voice pitched only for her ears. Eliza nodded hesitantly. "Some, sir. I've ridden work horses." "Good enough." He gestured toward two horses tied nearby, a massive black stallion and a smaller chestnut. "Mare. The mare is gentle." As they walked toward the horses, the cowboy fell into step slightly behind her, not touching, but creating a shield between her and the dispersing crowd. She noticed how his hand rested casually near his weapon, and how his eyes continually scanned their surroundings. This man was no plantation dandy. He carried himself like someone who'd seen trouble and knew how to handle it. "Sir," she ventured as he checked the mare's saddle straps, "might I ask your name?" He paused, glancing at her over the horse's back. "James. James Thornton." And what will you require of me, Mr. Thornton?" His expression shifted, in a way she couldn't read. "We'll discuss that once we're away from here." That non-answer sent a chill through her. Away from here could mean anything, a private home, a remote cabin, or somewhere far worse than any plantation. The mysterious cowboy hadn't bid against Whitmore just to show him mercy. $1,000 suggested very particular expectations. James Thornton helped her mount the mare with a courtesy that surprised her. His touch was brief and professional, his hand steady as he checked her stirrups one final time. When he mounted his own horse, he moved with the fluid grace of someone who lived more in the saddle than on solid ground. "We'll ride hard for the first hour, then slow to spare the horses," he informed her matter-of-factly. "Think you can manage?" "Yes, sir." She adjusted her grip on the reins, trying to quiet the fearful voice in her head that whispered dire warnings. Whatever lay ahead, it had to be better than Whitmore's plantation. That's what she told herself, even as doubt gnawed at her stomach. They rode out of the auction grounds at a steady canter, leaving behind the noise and stench of human commerce. The Louisiana countryside opened before them, vast sugar plantations giving way to untamed swampland, then gradually transitioning to drier prairie as they headed northwest. Eliza focused on maintaining her seat and following James's pace, grateful for the physical demands that kept her mind from spiraling into panic. After an hour of hard riding, James slowed his stallion to a walk, and she gratefully followed suit. They were well beyond the outskirts of New Orleans now, surrounded by nothing but rolling grassland and the occasional grove of trees. The isolation should have terrified her, but somehow the presence of her silent companion provided a strange sense of safety she couldn't explain. "You ride well for someone who claims little experience," he commented, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "I learn quickly, sir. It's necessary in my position." She kept her voice neutral, still uncertain of him. "Your position." He pulled out a canteen and offered it to her first, another surprising courtesy. "Tell me about yourself, Eliza." The use of her name startled her. Most masters only bothered to learn the names of their house slaves, if that. She drank deeply from the canteen, the cool water soothing her parched throat, before replying. "I've been a house slave since I was 8, sir. My mother was a teacher once before she came to Louisiana. She taught me to read and write, and when my master took over education of his children, I continued those lessons. I've managed household accounts, organized events, and trained other servants." "Your former master is the one who just died?" "Yes, sir. Colonel Harrison. He was fair by the standards of his time, or at least as fair as a master can be to his slaves." She paused, considering her words carefully. His son inherited the debts, but not the plantation sense. The auction was to settle accounts. James nodded slowly, absorbing this information. They rode in companionable silence for another stretch. Before he spoke again, "What do you know about the territories?" The question caught her off guard. "The Indian territories, sir?" "Not much. They're west of here, beyond Texas. Why do you ask? Ever think about what life might be like out there, beyond the reach of law, beyond plantations and auction blocks?" Her heart began to race. Was he suggesting what she thought? "Sir, I don't understand." He glanced at her, and for the first time she saw something like compassion in those steel-gray eyes. "You will, Eliza, but for now let's ride." As they continued westward, the weight of uncertainty pressed on her. James Thornton had spent a fortune to buy her, and now spoke cryptically of territories beyond law. What strange game was he playing? Was this all leading to some elaborate cruelty, or dared she hope for something else entirely? The sun climbed higher in the sky as questions swirled in her mind, each mile taking her further from everything she'd ever known into a future shrouded in mystery. The landscape gradually changed as they rode deeper into unfamiliar territory. The familiar humidity of Louisiana gave way to drier air, the vegetation turning from lush plantations to rougher prairie growth. Eliza had never been more than 20 miles from the plantation where she was born, and the expanding world around her was both terrifying and exhilarating. By late afternoon, James led them to a small creek shaded by twisted cottonwood trees. "We'll rest here," he announced, dismounting with practiced ease. "Water the horses first, then yourself." She slid from the saddle less gracefully than she'd have liked, her muscles protesting the long ride. James tended to both horses with careful attention, showing them the same courtesy he'd extended to her. As she knelt by the creek to drink, her reflection in the water startled her. The girl looking back seemed different, windswept, uncertain, but somehow more vivid than the controlled house slave who'd stood on the auction block that morning. "Tell me," James said suddenly as he unpacked provisions from his saddlebags, "what do you know about freedom?" The word hung in the air like a challenge. Eliza straightened slowly, water dripping from her chin as she studied him. Freedom was a forbidden topic in her world, a word that brought punishment if spoken by the wrong person at the wrong time. "I know it's illegal for slaves to be freed in Louisiana," she answered carefully. "The state requires them to be transported out immediately. And if someone were to ignore state law?" "Sir, She struggled to understand his meaning. "What are you asking?" James pulled out hardtack and dried meat, laying them on a clean cloth. "I'm asking if you'd rather continue to New Orleans with me as my property, subject to whatever use I choose, or if you'd prefer to ride north and west into territory where $1,000 investment becomes meaningless." The breath left her lungs as understanding crashed over her. "You mean to free me?" "I mean to offer you a choice, something they didn't give you on that auction block." He met her gaze steadily. "But understand, freedom isn't simple. It comes with its own hardships and dangers. No food guaranteed every day, no roof overhead without working for it, no protection except what you can fight for." Eliza's mind raced. This had to be some kind of test. Masters didn't spend fortunes just to free slaves. There had to be conditions, expectations she hadn't yet understood. "If I chose freedom," she said slowly, "what would you gain?" James smiled slightly, the first real expression she'd seen on his face since the auction. "The satisfaction of knowing a good person gets a real chance at life. And perhaps," he added, "a traveling companion for a few weeks while you learn to survive on your own." A traveling companion? She couldn't hide her skepticism. Why would you need that? The territories can be dangerous for anyone alone. Even experienced travelers like myself appreciate good company. He handed her a piece of hardtack. "Your education could be valuable out there. Not everyone can read, write, or figure accounts. Those skills matter beyond plantation walls." As she chewed the tough bread, Eliza tried to process this impossible conversation. Men didn't behave this way, masters didn't offer freedom, and strangers didn't spend fortunes helping people they'd never met. Yet here was James Thornton speaking of choice and freedom as if they were everyday concepts. "What do you do?" she asked, hoping to understand him better. "You don't dress like a plantation owner." "I'm a scout," he answered, settling back against a tree. "Work for people exploring. New territories, sometimes guide wagon trains, occasionally help establish trade routes. I've been through most of the land between here and California." "Is that where you're heading now?" "Eventually, but the route depends on who's traveling with me." The implication was clear, and Eliza felt a flutter of something between hope and terror. They spent the rest of the afternoon in relative silence, each lost in thought. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, James finally stood and brushed grass from his clothes. "We need to make camp soon. Safe spot about 5 miles west." He studied her carefully. "I need your decision, Eliza. Do we continue to New Orleans as master and property, or do we turn north toward the territories as two free people sharing a trail?" The question she'd never dared imagine having to answer now demanded a response. Every instinct, every hard-learned lesson of survival warned her that this was too good to be true. Men like James Thornton didn't exist. Freedom wasn't bought for $1,000 and offered freely to a stranger. Yet looking into his steady gaze, seeing the patient way he waited for her answer without pressure or threat, something in her wanted desperately to believe. What if there were still good people in the world? What if this impossible offer was real? "North," she whispered, then stronger. "North, sir. James. If you'll have me as a traveling companion, I choose north." He nodded once, a flash of what might have been satisfaction crossing his features. "Then we ride for the territories. Fair warning, the life won't be easy. No going back once we commit to this path." "I've never had easy," Eliza replied, a strange lightness filling her chest despite the uncertainty ahead. "But I've also never had choice before." "Then let's see what you do with it." James swung back into his saddle with familiar ease, waiting patiently as she mounted the mare. As they turned their horses toward the setting sun, Eliza felt something shift inside her. Fear still existed, but for the first time, so did hope. The auction block had stood black against the sky that morning, a symbol of everything cruel in their world. Now that world was falling away with each mile, replaced by possibilities she couldn't yet imagine. Whatever lay ahead in the territories, hardship, danger, uncertainty, it would be faced as a free woman, not a slave. As they rode into the sunset, Eliza dared to dream of a future she might create for herself, one choice at a time. The mysterious cowboy had offered her the most precious gift imaginable, and though questions still swirled about his motives and methods, she chose to trust this unexpected hope. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, and for the first time in 17 years, Eliza Hawthorne rode toward it as a free woman. Whatever awaited her beyond the horizon, she would meet it standing upright, with dignity intact, just as her mother had taught her. The journey was just beginning, and perhaps that was the most terrifying and wonderful truth of all. The prairie night descended with a suddenness that startled Eliza, as if someone had drawn a heavy curtain across the sky. Stars emerged in countless multitudes, more than she'd ever seen through the haze of plantation smoke and city lights. The air grew crisp, carrying scents of sagebrush and something wild she couldn't identify. James guided them to a protected hollow near a cluster of mesquite trees, dismounting with the same efficiency that characterized all his movements. Without being asked, Eliza helped unsaddle the horses, watching carefully as he showed her how to check their hooves and rub down their coats properly. "Everything depends on these animals out here," he explained, examining the black stallion's front leg. "A lame horse can cost you everything." She nodded, absorbing the lesson. This was different from caring for plantation horses. These animals were survival itself, not luxury transport. As James built a small fire using dried brush and what he called cow chips, she gathered her courage to ask the question that had haunted her since his offer. "Why me? Why spend a fortune on someone you'd never met?" The firelight cast shadows across his weathered face as he considered his answer. "Ever hear of a person named Dred Scott? The slave who tried to sue for his freedom? Everyone's been talking about that case. His fight made something clear to me. The system's broken, and waiting for laws to change won't help people suffering today." James poked at the fire with a stick. "I had means to help one person, and you were there. But $1,000 is just money. What good is wealth if it can't create something better?" His words struck something deep within her. On the plantation, every penny was counted, every resource hoarded. The idea of using money to buy freedom rather than labor seemed as foreign as reading philosophy instead of scripture. They shared a simple meal of beans and hardtack, supplemented by wild onions James had gathered. The food was rough compared to kitchen fare, but seasoned with freedom. It tasted better than any feast. Tomorrow we reach a decision point, James said, as they prepared their bedrolls. We can follow the Butterfield stage route, safer, with stations every 50 miles or so, or we can cut through Comanche territory, faster, but riskier. Eliza considered this. The plantation had taught her that decisions were made by others, plans executed by those with authority. Now James spoke as if her opinion mattered. "What would you choose?" she asked. "I've ridden both paths. The stage route means more people, some friendly, some not. Word of your situation might spread faster along those lines. So, Comanche territory offers more protection through isolation?" Sharp thinking. James' approval seemed genuine. "Though the Comanche aren't the bloodthirsty savages some claim, I've traded with several bands. The key is respect. If you show it, you often receive it." The night grew colder, and James produced an extra blanket from his pack. "Get good rest. Tomorrow starts our real journey." But sleep proved elusive for Eliza. Every sound, an owl's call, wind through brush, the horses' shifting position, seemed magnified in this alien landscape. Her mind churned with possibilities both terrifying and exhilarating. She was free, or at least moving toward freedom. The very thought seemed impossible, like trying to grasp moonlight. Dawn brought new challenges. James woke before first light, already preparing for the day. "Ever cook over an open fire?" he asked. "Only in the kitchen hearth, watching the plantation cook." "Time for your first lesson in trail cooking." He produced a small iron pot and showed her how to make coffee using grounds and creek water. "Out here, coffee's more than a drink. It's medicine, trade currency, and sometimes the only thing keeping you going." The results were bitter, but warming. As they ate leftover beans, James outlined their path. "We'll take the harder route. You've made your choice for freedom. Now we commit fully." By mid-morning, the landscape had transformed. Red earth replaced green grass, rock formations rose like ancient monuments, and the horizon stretched impossibly far. This was country that felt older than time itself, shaped by forces beyond human comprehension. They rode in companionable silence, broken only by James pointing out landmarks and sharing survival knowledge. How to find water by watching bird flight patterns, which plants could heal or poison, how to read weather signs in cloud formations. "You told me you learn quickly," he observed. "That's good. Everything I teach you could save your life someday." Around noon, they encountered their first test. 3 riders approached from the east, their silhouettes sharp against the bright sky. James's hand moved casually toward his weapon, though his posture remained relaxed. "Know them?" Eliza asked quietly. "No, but that doesn't mean they don't know of us." As the riders drew closer, she could make out details. Rough men on rough horses, the kind who might hire themselves out as trackers or worse. Her heart hammered as they reined in about 50 feet away. "Afternoon!" the lead rider called out, his eyes scanning both James and Eliza with calculated assessment. "Long way from anywhere out here." "Same could be said for you," James replied evenly. "True enough." The man's gaze lingered on Eliza. Unusual to see a lady this far west. "My wife's got wanderlust," James said smoothly, and Eliza felt slight pressure as he moved his horse closer to hers. Insisted on seeing California before settling down. The lie came so naturally she almost believed it herself. The riders exchanged glances, clearly torn between suspicion and acceptance of this explanation. "Best be careful," another rider warned. "Comanche been active lately. Government's looking to clear them out, which makes them jumpy." "Appreciate the warning," James nodded. "Safe travels." The men hesitated a moment longer before continuing eastward. Only after they disappeared, over a rise, did James relax slightly. "Wife?" Eliza questioned, trying to keep her voice steady. Simplest explanation that might discourage unwanted interest. His eyes met hers briefly. "The truth would raise too many questions we can't answer safely." They rode harder after the encounter, putting distance between themselves and the suspicious men. By late afternoon, James led them into a narrow canyon that offered both shelter and concealment. "We'll make camp early here," he decided. "Give those riders time to move on if they decide to double back." While James tended the horses, Eliza gathered firewood and water. Each task felt monumental, decisions she'd never had to make, responsibilities that had always belonged to others. Yet with each small accomplishment, confidence flickered to life within her. As evening approached, James began what he called reading lessons, not from books but from the land itself. He showed her animal tracks in soft earth, teaching their stories. Deer here at dawn. See how the tracks overlap? They were hurrying, spooked by something. He pointed to larger impressions, horse tracks, but not shod like ours. These could be wild mustangs or Comanche, she guessed. Possibly. They favor barefoot horses for better footing on rough ground. They traced more stories in the earth. A coyote stalking a rabbit, birds gathering at an underground spring, even the faint impression of a snake crossing sand. Each lesson opened a new book of knowledge, one written across the infinite pages of the wilderness. "Back home," Eliza said, as they shared another simple meal, "I read books to the Colonel's children. Robinson Crusoe, Gulliver's Travels, Jane Eyre. I thought I understood adventure through those pages. And now? Now I know books are pale shadows of the real thing. Every moment out here feels like living an entire novel." James's rare smile appeared. "Good. That means you're truly seeing what's around you." As stars emerged, he produced a worn leather pouch containing maps and papers. "Time you learned real navigation. We can't depend on luck to stay ahead of pursuit." By firelight, he spread a hand-drawn map of territories and Indian lands. His finger traced routes and landmarks as he explained the complex geography of freedom. "Here's what most don't understand about escape," he said. "It's not just running from, it's running toward something. Direction matters as much as distance. Where exactly are we heading? That depends. Some free black communities exist in Kansas Territory. Canada's possible if you're willing to risk it. Or the Pacific coast might offer new beginnings." The possibilities overwhelmed her. "How do I choose?" "Start by understanding what you're choosing between." James pulled out more papers, newspaper clippings, handbills, even sketch portraits. "See this, rewards for runaway slaves. Your former master's estate might not pursue you, but Whitmore could still pay for information." Cold reality settled in her stomach. So someone might still be hunting us. "Knowledge is preparation, not fear," James corrected. "We plan for possibilities while hoping for the best." They spent hours studying maps, learning codes James used to navigate, bent twigs marking safe water, stone arrangements pointing to shelter, even certain bird calls that meant danger or assistance. "The Underground Railroad has its own language," he explained. "Songs that contain directions, quilt patterns marking safe houses, even specific phrases that identify helpers. You've done this before." "A few times. Never for money. Always for conscience." As the fire crackled and night deepened, they discussed strategies for different scenarios, what to do if approached by lawmen, how to handle suspicious towns, when to avoid settlements entirely. Each conversation revealed more about James's experience and the careful networks of people committed to helping others find freedom. "The hardest part," James said eventually, "is learning to think free. 17 years of slavery don't vanish overnight. Your instincts still tell you to defer, to hide, to please others first." His words struck deep. Even now, part of her wanted to ask permission before speaking, to wait for orders before acting. The psychological chains would take longer to break than the legal ones. How do I change that? By making decisions, small ones at first. What direction to ride, when to rest, how to prepare food. Each choice builds confidence. That night, wrapped in blankets under a canopy of stars, Eliza made her first truly free decision. Instead of lying silent and still as she'd done every night for 17 years, she chose to ask questions, to learn, to claim space in conversation. "Tell me about the territories," she requested. "What are they really like?" James propped himself up, clearly prepared to honor her curiosity. "Vast beyond imagining. Mountains that scrape heaven, deserts that test every aspect of human endurance, plains where you can see tomorrow's weather coming, cities that don't exist yet but will, places where people aren't measured by birth or color, but by what they can do." Sounds like paradise. Paradise has its own serpents, harsh winters that kill the unprepared, outlaws who make plantation overseers look like Sunday school teachers, disease that sweeps through settlements like wildfire. Are you trying to scare me? I'm trying to prepare you, because despite all dangers, it's still the closest thing to freedom most people will ever know. Dawn found them riding again, but the rhythm had changed. James began testing her knowledge, asking her to make decisions about their route based on what she'd learned. When to water the horses, how to judge safe distances from settlements, which plants might supplement their diet. Each challenge met successfully built her confidence. She was learning to think beyond the narrow confines of slavery's mental prison. Questions that once would have been forbidden now flowed freely. What happens when we reach California? What about winter? How do people survive out here? Have you always traveled alone? James answered each question patiently, often using them as springboards for new lessons. The last question, though, brought a shadow to his face. Not always. Lost a brother to cholera on the Oregon Trail. Lost a wife to childbirth in Texas. Sometimes riding alone seems safer than caring for others you might lose. Then why help me? Because isolation isn't the same as safety. And sometimes helping others helps heal what's broken in yourself. They rode in contemplative silence after that admission. Eliza considered how this stranger carried his own burdens while shouldering hers. Perhaps freedom always came with the risk of loss, the price of having something worth losing. The landscape continued changing as they pushed deeper into untamed country. They passed ancient rock paintings, handprints and horses and spirals, relics of peoples who'd traveled these paths centuries before. James explained how different tribes marked territory, how to recognize sacred places that should be respected, but not entered. The land remembers, he told her. Sometimes the wise choice is listening rather than claiming. But by afternoon, they reached what James called point of decision, a rocky outcrop marking where the Butterfield route diverged from the path through Comanche territory. He reined in at the summit, letting the horses rest while they considered options. If we take the stage route, we risk encountering search parties, but we also have better support, trading posts, water stations, even law enforcement that might help rather than hinder. And the other path. Fewer eyes watching, but fewer helping hands too. We become dependent only on ourselves and whatever hospitality we might find among the Comanche. Eliza studied the two diverging trails, one marked by wagon ruts and the refuse of civilization, the other barely visible except to trained eyes. This felt like a larger metaphor, the choice between struggling within systems designed to constrain her or forging entirely new paths outside established boundaries. "I've lived my whole life on the easier road," she said finally. "Now I want to see what happens when I choose challenge over comfort." James nodded approvingly. "Comanche territory it is, you sure?" Instead of doubt, Eliza felt certainty. "I'm sure. If I'm truly choosing freedom, I choose the full measure of it." They descended the western slope into wild country where the grass grew taller and antelope scattered at their approach. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising their first real test of wilderness survival. Everything changes in the rain, James warned. Trails disappear, rivers become dangerous. Fire becomes difficult. We'll need to find proper shelter before the storm hits. The afternoon became a lesson in urgency. They had to balance speed against preserving the horses' strength, navigate by landmarks that grew less distinct as clouds thickened, make constant evaluations about direction and duration. When rain finally struck, it arrived with the force of judgment. Wind drove sheets of water horizontally across the prairie, turning the world grey and indistinct. James guided them to a rocky overhang, barely adequate for shelter. As they huddled with the horses, watching nature's fury, Eliza experienced a revelation. Despite the discomfort, despite the undeniable danger, she felt more alive than ever before. Every sense was heightened, every decision mattered. This was existence stripped to its essence, survival and choice intertwined in each moment. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she found herself saying. James glanced at her, surprise evident. "Not. Many find storms beautiful. It's honest," she explained. "No pretense, no hidden agenda, just raw power you have to respect or perish. You're beginning to understand the frontier." The storm lasted until sunset, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Creeks had become rivers, arroyos filled with rushing water. The very ground seemed altered. But as the clouds parted, light struck the wet earth with startling intensity, creating a world that seemed newly born. They camped in the clean, swept air, building a fire from wood they'd had the foresight to keep dry. As they waited for coffee to boil, James surprised her with a gift, a small book bound in oilcloth against the elements. "Been carrying this, not sure why," he admitted. "But maybe you know." She opened it carefully. Shakespeare's sonnets. Tears pricked her eyes unexpectedly. "You saved this through the auction, the ride, the storm? Some things are worth protecting." Reading by firelight became magical. She chose Sonnet 116. "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments," and found new meaning in words she'd known only academically before. Here, love meant something different than the contractual arrangements of plantations. True minds could meet regardless of circumstance or law. "Beautiful words," James commented when she finished. "They mean more now," she admitted. "When you're really free to choose, everything means more." As night deepened, they discussed their route. The storm had complicated but not eliminated their options. James spread his map again, showing alternate paths through Comanche lands. "We'll aim for Adobe Walls first. It's an old trading post where the Comancheros still come. If we present ourselves properly, we might find both safety and information." Comancheros. Traders who work with the Comanche. Not all white men out here see Indians as enemies. Some build bridges instead of walls. The education continued as stars emerged through clearing clouds. James taught her proper horse care for difficult conditions, how to maintain weapons in wet weather, even basic phrases in Spanish, and sign language for communication with diverse frontier populations. Later, as she tried to sleep, Eliza reflected on the day's transformations. She'd made real decisions with life-altering consequences. She'd faced danger and found courage. She'd discovered that freedom meant not just absence of chains, but presence of choice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was beginning to understand something fundamental. Adventure and danger weren't things that happened to people. They were choices people made, and she had chosen. In the darkness, listening to horses breathing and James keeping watch, Eliza Hawthorne, no longer just a slave, not yet fully free, but absolutely, irrevocably herself, drifted into sleep. With something she'd forgotten existed, hope for a future of her own making. The night passed peacefully despite lingering rain, and dawn brought clarity both in weather and purpose. They would ride toward adobe walls, toward unknown encounters with the Comanche, toward possibilities neither could fully imagine. But they would ride together, teacher and student, protector and protected, two people writing their own stories in a vast and unforgiving land. As they saddled up and headed west, Eliza caught sight of her reflection in a rain puddle. Hair uncovered, dress travel-stained, face marked by wind and weather. But for the first time in her life, what she saw was not property or servant, but a woman creating her own destiny. The prairie morning broke clear and crisp, every blade of grass jeweled with leftover rain. Eliza woke to find James already packing supplies, his movements efficient and purposeful. The storm had passed, but its effects persisted. Muddy trails that would slow their horses, but also wash away any tracks left by potential pursuers. "Different world after a storm," James commented as she rolled up her bedding. "Everything reset. Good time for new beginnings." They rode hard through the morning, covering ground while weather held. The territory was changing again, rolling. Grasslands giving way to rougher country with scattered mesas and deeper canyons. James taught her to read the land like a map, pointing out how soil color changed between regions, how vegetation patterns revealed underground water, how even buffalo paths had their own logic. By midday, they encountered their first significant test. Racing across the prairie were 3 horses, wild mustangs moving with fluid grace. But something followed, a dark shape, barely visible against the horizon. "Buffalo wolf," James said immediately, reaching for his rifle. "Single one, hunting the horses." "Alone?" Eliza asked, surprised. "Don't wolves hunt in packs?" "Most do, but a lone wolf either means it's exiled from its pack or tracking prey too dangerous for the whole pack to risk." The wolf gained on the trailing horse, a smaller mare already limping. Without thinking, Eliza found herself urging, "Can't we help?" James glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. Nature has its own laws. But as they watched, the drama unfolded differently. The limping mare suddenly wheeled around, facing the wolf with unexpected courage. The other horses circled back, forming a protective barrier. The wolf, confronted by united opposition, hesitated. Smart animals, James observed, turned vulnerability into strength by standing together. They watched as the wolf finally slunk away, heading toward easier prey. The mustangs remained, clustered for several minutes before gradually dispersing back to grazing. "There's a lesson there," Eliza said softly. "Many lessons. Power in numbers. Courage born of necessity. Sometimes survival means fighting rather than running." As they continued riding, James shared more about the territories ahead. Adobe Wall sits at the edge of what some call the Sea of Grass. It's where Comanche meet Comanchero, where Spanish silver meets Indian horses, where different worlds do business despite official hostility. Dangerous ground. Dangerous and necessary. The Comanche control vast territory, know every water source, every hiding place. Making enemies would be fatal, making allies. He let the possibilities hang unspoken. Late afternoon brought their first sight of Comanche warriors, 4 riders watching from a distant ridge. James immediately signaled peaceful intentions, raising both hands palms forward while keeping his rifle secured to his saddle. "Let them see we're not threats," he instructed quietly. "But keep your horse positioned for quick retreat, if needed." For long minutes, both groups remained motionless, evaluating threat and potential. Finally, one rider separated from the group, approaching at a measured pace. "Remember what I taught you about respect showing in posture," James murmured. "No sudden movements, no direct staring, no signs of fear." The approaching warrior was younger than Eliza expected, perhaps 20 summers, with 2 eagle feathers adorning his black hair. His horse bore distinctive markings, and his bearing suggested someone important within his band. The warrior stopped 20 paces away, studying them intently. James spoke first in carefully practiced Spanish, with scattered Comanche phrases. "We travel with peaceful intentions through your lands. We seek adobe walls for trade." The warrior's response came in accented but clear English. "Many seek adobe walls. Not all arrive. Why should your journey be permitted?" James's surprise at the English was minimal but visible. "We carry goods for fair trade, silver, coffee, and knowledge worth sharing. We respect the laws of hospitality in Comanche lands." The warrior's gaze shifted to Eliza, and she felt the weight of examination. The woman, wife, slave, or burden? The question struck like lightning. Before James could answer, Eliza found her voice. "I am my own property, traveling by choice as companion." To a respected scout, the warrior's eyebrows rose slightly. Whether at her boldness or her words, she couldn't tell. After a moment that stretched like eternity, he nodded slowly. "Truth sounds different than lies. Words must match deeds in Comanche country." James relaxed incrementally. "The woman speaks truly. I am James Thornton, known to traders. May we know your name and standing?" "I am Nadua, scout for my people. I remember tales of Thornton, one who trades fairly, keeps promises." He gestured toward his distant companions. "Your passage through this region is granted, but adobe walls tests intentions. Prepare your hearts as you prepare your horses." With that cryptic warning, Nadua wheeled his horse and rejoined his companions. The 4 riders disappeared over the ridge as suddenly as they'd appeared. "That was—" Eliza started. "Fortune," James finished. "Nadua has influence. His permission means safe passage, at least through this territory." "And the warning about adobe walls?" "Every frontier outpost has its own politics, its own dangers. Adobe walls exists because various groups need a neutral meeting place, but neutrality gets tested daily." They made camp early that evening, utilizing extra daylight for another kind of education. James introduced Eliza to the basics of frontier diplomacy. "Tomorrow we reach adobe walls. Different rules apply there. It's not civilization, but it's not pure wilderness either. You'll see former slaves trading openly, Indians bargaining with Mexicans, Americans dealing with people they're officially at war with." "How do you navigate such contradictions?" "By being valuable to all sides and enemy to none." "Your presence complicates things. A woman in frontier trading posts draws attention, but your education and bearing might also earn respect." As they prepared dinner, James produced a weathered packet of clothing from his saddlebags. "Been saving these. More appropriate for adobe walls than your current dress." The garments were practical: a split riding skirt, sturdy blouse, and leather vest. Borrowed from a California woman last year, should fit well enough. Changing behind a screen of blankets, Eliza discovered how differently clothing shaped identity. The riding skirt allowed freedom of movement she'd never experienced. The vest provided pockets, revolutionary concept for storing personal items within reach. "Better," James approved when she emerged. "Now you look like someone who belongs here rather than someone displaced." That evening, he taught her basics of various trading languages, enough Spanish to greet and bargain, sign language for common concepts, even some Comanche phrases of courtesy. Each lesson reinforced the reality of her situation. She was learning to navigate a world that operated outside any law she'd known. Dawn found them riding toward adobe walls with renewed determination. The trading post materialized gradually, first as a smudge against the horizon, then as distinct structures that grew more detailed with each mile. Built around an old Spanish mission, adobe walls comprise thick-walled buildings arranged defensively, Trade wagons clustered inside the compound, while horses grazed in watched paddocks. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys, suggesting significant activity despite early morning. "Remember," James advised as they approached, "we're here to trade and gather information. Keep your ears open, your opinions quiet. Many here might disapprove of your freedom, but they'll respect business over prejudice, usually." The gate stood open, guarded by two men who watched their approach with professional interest. Inside, the courtyard buzzed with activity. Merchants unpacked goods, while Indians examined blankets and knives. Mexican traders haggled over horses as former mountain men discussed routes west. They secured their horses first, then James led her to the main trading room. The building's thick walls created cool dimness, where men of various origins conducted business in multiple languages. The proprietor, a grizzled man named Socorro, greeted James with familiarity. "Thornton, been months. What brings you east?" "Trade, news, and passage west. Also looking to hire trustworthy guides for California routes." Socorro's eyes lingered on Eliza. "New companion?" "Associate. Educated woman skilled in accounts and languages. Could be valuable for expanding trade networks." The designation as associate rather than wife or property subtly established her status. Socorro nodded approvingly. "Brains worth more than beauty out here. Coffee?" Over strong coffee, they discussed conditions. The war between Mexico and America complicated trade routes. Comanche raids targeted both sides equally. Buffalo hunters pushed further north, stirring territorial conflicts. Yet commerce continued, adapting to chaos with remarkable resilience. "Interesting man arrived yesterday," Socorro mentioned casually, "claims to be pursuing stolen property, making inquiries about runaway slaves, offering rewards for information." Eliza's chest tightened. James's hand moved to his coffee cup, the only sign of tension. Many people pass through with stories. Most fade quickly. True, but this one carries official papers, says he represents multiple plantations, has sketched descriptions. Socorro glanced meaningfully at Eliza. "Descriptions are worthless in changing times," James replied carefully. "People transform when they choose freedom over bondage." Socorro studied them both before nodding, slowly. "Indeed, some transformations make excellent trading partners." The message was clear. He suspected, but wouldn't interfere for now. They spent the day establishing their trading presence. James exchanged coffee and sugar for local information, while Eliza discovered her literacy drew attention. Several traders asked her to verify written contracts, check arithmetic, even write letters. "Didn't expect to find education here," admitted a French trader named Dubois. "Most frontier women barely read their own names." "Education finds value everywhere," Eliza responded, gaining confidence. "Knowledge adapts to necessity." By afternoon, they'd gathered crucial intelligence. The man hunting runaways was named Kellerman, a professional slave catcher with connections throughout the territory. He'd offered substantial rewards for information leading to Eliza's capture, or any runaway matching her description. "He's systematic," James explained privately. "Bribed guards, interviewed traders, even consulted Comanche scouts. We need to leave soon, but smart moves matter more than quick ones." Their opportunity came unexpectedly. A mounted party arrived, 6 riders led by a distinguished Mexican gentleman named Don Carlos Morales. His caravan bound for Santa Fe needed additional scouts familiar with Apache territory. "Providence smiles," Don Carlos declared after hearing James's credentials. "Your experience could save many lives. The Apache grow bold since the American War began." While James negotiated terms, Eliza overheard another conversation. Kellerman had entered the trading room, questioning Socorro about recent arrivals. His description of his quarry grew uncomfortably specific. Acting on instinct, she approached Don Carlos directly. In carefully enunciated Spanish, she said, "Your expedition requires financial records, no? I maintain accounts, calculate provisions, ensure fair distribution of supplies." Don Carlos raised surprised eyebrows. "A woman of numbers, unusual but potentially valuable. Can you prove this skill?" She quickly demonstrated by calculating supply ratios for his 20-person expedition, determining water needs per person per mile, even suggesting cost savings through combined purchases. "Remarkable," Don Carlos admitted. "James, your associate, joins our arrangement?" Before James could respond, Kellerman approached their group. "Excuse interruption. I'm searching for runaway property, young female, educated, traveling with suspicious companions." Don Carlos drew himself up imperiously. "I see only my new expedition accountant discussing legitimate business. Perhaps you confuse commerce with your personal manhunt? I have legal authority in Santa Fe, in Mexico. Your authority diminishes with distance from its source." Don Carlos turned to James. "When do we depart? Tomorrow seems ideal." James caught on quickly. "Dawn departure suits us. Miss Eliza's proven invaluable already." Kellerman's frustration was visible, but challenging a respected Mexican don risked more than pursuing one runaway. He retreated with promises to continue his investigation. That evening, as the sun painted adobe walls gold, they made final preparations. Don Carlos provided them with official travel documents listing Eliza as expedition accountant. Such papers wouldn't stop determined pursuers, but might delay them. "You impressed him," James noted as they packed supplies. "Quick thinking with the accounting demonstration." "Survival sometimes means creating your own opportunities," she replied, applying lessons learned. They dined with the expedition members, a diverse group including Mexican vaqueros, experienced scouts, even a Pueblo guide named Tua. The camaraderie surprised Eliza. Here, competence mattered more than background. Her bookkeeping skills earned respect rather than suspicion. Late that night, Socorro found James privately. "Kellerman spreads gold freely. Someone will eventually claim his rewards. We leave tomorrow." "Good, but travel carefully. Some bounty hunters follow for months, like wolves tracking blood scent." As midnight approached, Eliza stood looking out over the courtyard. 24 hours earlier, she'd ridden in as a potential victim. Now she departed as an essential member of Don Carlos's expedition. The transformation seemed impossible, yet undeniable. "Doubts?" James asked, joining her vigil. "Opposite, wonder. 2 weeks ago, I stood on an auction block. Tonight, I'm planning supply routes for 20 riders crossing Apache country. Change happens at frontier speeds, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once." They shared a moment of comfortable silence before retiring. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new landscapes, new tests of their journey's purpose. Dawn arrived with organized chaos as Don Carlos's expedition prepared to depart. Horses were saddled, pack animals loaded with military precision. Eliza's mare was supplemented with a spare mount. Don Carlos insisted his accountant needed backup transportation. As they formed up to leave, Kellerman appeared at the gates with 2 hired men, his eyes fixed on Eliza with obvious recognition, but Don Carlos positioned himself protectively. "Senor, you delay official Mexican business. Papers are in order, expedition sanctioned by Santa Fe authorities." Kellerman's jaw worked furiously, but legal complications with Mexico could endanger his entire operation. He stepped aside, though his glare promised future pursuit. They rode out as morning mist still clung to the prairie. The expedition moved with practiced efficiency. Scouts ranged ahead, guards protected flanks, supply wagons kept steady pace. Eliza found herself riding near the center, her position protecting her while keeping her close to Don Carlos for consultation. The Mexican Don proved an unexpected ally. During their first rest stop, he shared wisdom about frontier survival. Out here, old prejudices become expensive luxuries. Smart leader uses every resource, regardless of origin. Including escaped slaves? She asked directly. Including anyone with courage and capability. He smiled knowingly. Your friend James saved my cousin's life last year. Such debts extend beyond personal grudges. The revelation added another layer to James's quiet competence. How many lives had he saved? How many stories of compassion remained untold? As they traveled deeper into contested territory, the land itself seemed to change. Ancient Pueblo ruins dotted hillsides, abandoned Spanish missions crumbled into earth, signs of cultures layered upon cultures. Each abandoned place told stories of hope, failure, and persistence. Tua, the Pueblo guide, shared his knowledge freely. He taught Eliza to spot Apache sign, specific ways they arranged stones to mark water caches, distinctive track horse the marks that warned of danger. His matter-of-fact acceptance of her presence helped ease tensions among expedition members still adjusting to the unusual arrangement. Apache respect strength and knowledge, Tua explained. Your skills in numbers make you valuable ally, not vulnerable target. The second day brought their first real test. Apache scouts appeared on distant ridges, mirroring the expedition's movement. Don Carlos called a council to decide the appropriate response. We cannot outrun them, James assessed, and running suggests weakness or guilt. Then we demonstrate strength without aggression, Don Carlos decided. Tua, can you signal peaceful intentions? The Pueblo guide created smoke signals while expedition members maintained defensive readiness. For tense hours they advanced while being observed. Apache communication proved its sophistication. The watchers maintained distance but made no threatening moves. That evening, camped in a defensible canyon, Don Carlos assigned night duties. To Eliza's surprise, she received responsibilities equal to other members. Her first watch shift, from midnight to 2 a.m., represented unprecedented trust and authority. Standing guard under infinite stars, rifle within reach but peaceful darkness surrounding, Eliza experienced profound transformation. Just weeks ago, she'd been property with no right to defend herself. Now she protected others. The weapon in her hands wasn't just tool, it was symbol of agency claimed and earned. James relieved her at 2, noting her calm competence. Natural, born frontier woman. Natural-born survivor, she corrected. Whether in kitchen or canyon, adaptability matters most. They shared brief coffee before she returned to bedroll. His praise meant more than elaborate compliments ever had. Recognition from someone who understood frontier realities exceeded hollow words from those who'd never faced true challenges. Dawn revealed their Apache watchers had vanished overnight. Tua interpreted this positively. If they meant harm, they would have stayed for opportunity. Departure suggests respect or disinterest. Either way, continued vigilance remained essential. The expedition pressed westward, covering ground efficiently while maintaining defensive readiness. Don Carlos increasingly consulted Eliza on resource management, her mathematical precision helping optimize supplies. By the third day, they encountered another challenge. A river swollen by storms, flowing fast enough to complicate crossing. Don Carlos called halt to assess options. Upstream narrows but increases current, Tua reported. Downstream widens but softens banks. James studied the flow. Neither option's ideal. Need to find or create better ford. Eliza surprised the group by offering solution. During plantation years, she'd learned engineering principles from Colonel Harrison's books. If we anchor a guide rope at upstream angle, horses can cross without fighting full current. Use stronger horses to stabilize rope while others follow. The plan's soundness earned immediate respect. While men secured ropes and tested footing, Eliza calculated optimal spacing for maximum safety. Her leadership emerged naturally, born from knowledge applied practically. The crossing succeeded without incident, though tension remained until last pack animal reached safety. Don Carlos expressed appreciation openly. Quick thinking prevents disasters. Your education proves worth beyond ledgers. Such validation transformed more than personal confidence. Other expedition members began seeking her input on various challenges. Two vaqueros asked help resolving pay disputes. A scout requested assistance writing letter to family. Even those initially suspicious softened, recognizing competence transcended background. As they made camp that night in Protected Valley, James shared his observations. You're developing something important, respect earned through action rather than granted by position. Feels strange, frightening, and empowering simultaneously. That's growth. Comfort breeds stagnation. Challenge creates strength. Their conversation was interrupted by commotion from sentries. Riders approached from the east, 3 men pushing horses hard. Don Carlos immediately ordered defensive positions while signaling cautious welcome. The riders arrived exhausted. Former mountain men carrying urgent news. Apache bands were massing to the north, responding to increased military presence. Mexican government forces had advanced beyond usual boundaries, threatening traditional hunting grounds. War's expanding, the lead rider reported. Apaches aren't distinguishing between military and civilians anymore. Don Carlos weighed information carefully. His expedition needed to balance speed with caution. Too much haste might trigger Apache suspicion. Too much delay risked encounter with war parties. We continue present course but increase vigilance, he decided. Extra scouts, night guards doubled. Senorita Eliza's accounting adapts provisions for extended caution. The responsibility settled naturally on her shoulders. She recalculated. Supplies factoring slower travel, potential need for alternate routes, mathematics that once verified plantation commerce now sustained survival in hostile territory. As night fell, tensions ran higher despite fatigue. Eliza offered to extend her guard duty, recognizing others carried greater burdens. Don Carlos accepted, assigning James as companion for her watch. They stood guard at canyon entrance. 2 people who'd been strangers 3 weeks ago, now partners in purpose. Stars wheeled overhead as they discussed philosophies formerly forbidden, concepts of justice, freedom, human dignity's true meaning. Sometimes I wonder if we're running from old chains toward new ones, Eliza mused. Different laws, different masters, same essential struggle. Perhaps, James considered, but choosing your struggle matters. Chains accepted willingly differ from those imposed. Their conversation was interrupted by distinctive sound. Horses approaching from the east, 2 riders pushing mounts, hard through darkness. Something about their movements suggested pursuit rather than travel. James signaled alert quietly. Within minutes, expedition members took positions while maintaining appearance of sleeping camp. The approaching riders slowed cautiously at canyon entrance. "Calling camp! Emergency!" The voice carried official authority. "Mexican scouts carrying messages for Don Carlos." Don Carlos emerged from shadow, hand on weapon. "Identify yourselves properly." Messengers from Santa Fe garrison. Apache warbands attack supply lines. Escorts needed immediately for reinforcement column. But James had noticed something. The second rider held back unnaturally, face turned away. That watchfulness suggested mission differed from stated purpose. "Your companion remains silent," Don Carlos observed. Unusual for urgent missions. The silent rider finally spoke, accent different from his partner. "I serve as guide for territory ahead." Eliza's heart recognized that voice before her mind did. Carter, head overseer from Whitmore Plantation. His presence meant Kellerman hadn't abandoned pursuit, had likely paid Mexican authorities for false credentials. "Your guide carries himself strangely for these lands," James remarked carefully, "almost as if hunting human prey rather than marking trails." Tension crystallized in moonlit air. Carter's hand moved toward weapon, but Don Carlos had seen enough. "Your deception dishonors official purpose. Leave now or face consequences of misrepresentation. We have legitimate—" A dozen rifles suddenly aimed at the two riders ended debate. Carter's companion raised hands quickly, recognizing truth in their current vulnerability. Carter hesitated before finally responding. After tense moments, Don Carlos delivered ultimatum: "Depart immediately. Return means we treat you as bandits rather than officials." The riders withdrew grudgingly, recognizing superior force and suspicious circumstances. As hoofbeats faded, Don Carlos turned to his expedition. "Extra vigilance tonight. Deception follows us still." James drew Eliza aside as camp resettled. "They'll try again. Kellerman invested too much to surrender easily. So do we run faster, hide deeper. We continue as planned. Fear makes mistakes. Confidence creates opportunities." His calm reassurance steadied her nerves. They'd survived auction blocks and prairie storms. They would survive this pursuit as well. Dawn brought decision time. Don Carlos assembled his trusted advisors, James, Tua, senior vaqueros, and now Eliza. Her inclusion signaled complete integration into expedition leadership. "Our route continues through Apache country," Don Carlos explained. "But pursuers complicate matters. We need strategy accommodating both concerns." Tua suggested unexpected solution. "Apache value honor in warfare. If we request counsel with local band leader, explain our position truthfully, they might grant protection against dishonorable pursuit." The risk was substantial. Apache might see expedition as invaders themselves, but alternative meant constant vigilance against double threat. "Eliza's thoughts?" Don Carlos asked directly. She gathered courage to voice frontier politics. "Честность часто прокладывает путь там, где хитрость терпит неудачу. Если мы можем продемонстрировать уважение к их территории, объяснить наше положение с искренностью, мы можем найти неожиданных союзников против общего врага. Тех, кто не уважает ни человеческую свободу, ни племенной суверенитет. Honesty often opens paths where cunning fails. If we can demonstrate respect for their territory, explain our position with sincerity, we might find unexpected allies against a common enemy, those who respect neither human freedom nor tribal sovereignty." Don Carlos nodded slowly. "Wisdom. From experience, we attempt counsel." Within hours, they'd arranged meeting through Tua's careful diplomacy. An Apache band led by respected leader named Delgadito agreed to neutral parley at ancient council grounds. The meeting place impressed Eliza, a natural amphitheater of stone marked by generations of negotiations. Delgadito arrived with 10 warriors, each positioning suggesting readiness rather than aggression. Through Tua's translation, Don Carlos presented their case honestly. His expedition sought passage west, carrying legitimate trade. Recent pursuers followed not for trade, but for illegal purposes, hunting free people as property. Delgadito listened carefully before responding. "Your honesty is noted. These lands remember many promises broken by those who look like you." "We make no promises, only requests," Don Carlos replied. "Safe passage in exchange for trade goods and respect for your territories. And these hunters who pursue," James spoke directly, "they break laws of hospitality, chase freedom seekers for profit rather than justice. Their presence disturbs peace and trade. Something shifted in Delgadito's expression. Such men also hunt my people when rewards are offered. Common enemy creates strange allies. After lengthy discussion among his council, Delgadito offered compromise. You may pass if you accept Apache scouts as guides. They ensure you stay on agreed paths, protect you from those who follow with darker purposes. Relief swept through the expedition. Protection from pursuit, safe passage, all gained through honest dealing rather than deception. As they finalized details, Eliza realized something profound. The frontier forced people to see beyond surface differences, to recognize shared values beneath. Freedom seeker and territorial defender found common cause against those who saw humans as possessions. Returning to camp, energy ran higher despite exhaustion. They'd transformed potential enemies into cautious allies. The journey continued, but now with protection rather than just persistence. That night, as Apache scouts took positions around their perimeter, Eliza reflected on transformation's continuing nature. Every challenge faced, every alliance formed, built foundation of something she'd never imagined possible. True independence earned through courage, intelligence, and unexpected partnerships. The morning that followed promised new beginnings. With Apache protection, Kellerman and his allies couldn't continue open pursuit. Santa Fe lay several weeks ahead, but now the journey felt less like escape and more like adventure toward chosen destiny. As expedition formed up for days' travel, Don Carlos made announcement, "Today we ride not as strangers forced together by circumstance, but as comrades united by shared purpose. Each contributed to our success." Looking around the camp, Mexican vaqueros, Pueblo guides, Apache protectors, American scouts, and herself, escaped slave-turned-expedition accountant, Eliza saw frontier's true face. Not the violent chaos depicted in Eastern newspapers, but a complex web of relationships where survival demanded cooperation across differences. James caught her eye, slight smile suggesting shared understanding. They'd come far from that auction block, but the journey had only begun. Ahead lay California and whatever new challenges the Pacific coast might present. Behind lay proof that courage could create circles wider than law or tradition allowed. As the sun rose higher, painting mountains ahead in gold and shadow, the expedition moved forward. Each hoofbeat carried them not just across territory, but toward understanding that freedom meant more than absence of chains. It meant presence of choice, dignity of purpose, and unexpected kinship with those who shared the road. The Rio Grande cut a deep scar through the desert landscape, its muddy waters carrying stories from distant mountains. 2 months after leaving, adobe walls, Eliza stood at the river's edge, contemplating not just a physical crossing, but a threshold into an entirely new existence. Behind her lay the territories she now knew, the prairie strongholds, Apache councils, and Mexican outposts. Ahead stretched California, that fabled land where some claimed human worth was measured by deed rather than birth. Different world? Beyond this river, Don Carlos observed, joining her vigil. My authority extends to these banks, no further. In California, new rules apply, sometimes none at all. Their expedition had evolved significantly since adobe walls. What began as a trading caravan had become something unprecedented, a mobile community crossing cultural boundaries. The Apache scouts had departed 2 weeks earlier, replaced by Mexican guides familiar with desert passages. Kellerman's pursuit had indeed ended when Apache warriors returned his messenger horses with clear warning that further incursions would meet violent resistance. The ferry crossing takes 2 days, James reported from the riverbank. Captain says recent rains make it treacherous. Wants extra hands to manage current. Eliza had grown accustomed to James's efficient briefings. Their partnership had settled into comfortable rhythm. two people whose shared journey created unspoken understanding and mutual respect. The transformation from desperate rescue to genuine friendship had occurred gradually, like dawn painting the sky. "I'll manage the accounts for ferry passage," she offered, retrieving her ledger. The leather-bound book recorded more than finances. It documented their transformation. Entries began with terse survival notes and evolved into complex calculations for a community of 23 souls pursuing various futures. As she worked, memories surfaced of earlier river crossings, that first terrifying plunge into open water as a freed woman. Now she approached the challenge with confidence earned through experience. Each obstacle faced had built capability, replacing fear. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors, 3 riders approaching from the east, their polished gear suggesting official status. Don Carlos ordered cautious welcome while maintaining defensive posture. Recent experiences had taught them that authority often masked ulterior motives. "United States Army," the lead rider announced. "Lieutenant Harrison, conducting surveys of river crossings. Who leads this expedition?" Don Carlos stepped forward. "Don Carlos Morales, escorting trade goods to California settlements. Our papers are in order." The lieutenant's gaze swept their group, pausing notably on Eliza before returning to Donnie. "Carlos. Unusual composition for trade expedition. Woman riding with armed men raises questions. Questions answered by examining our documentation," Don Carlos replied firmly. "Unless military authority supersedes commercial rites of passage." Tension rippled through the camp. Everyone recognized the delicate position. American sovereignty extended ambiguously through these border regions. Military officers carried broad interpretive powers. Lieutenant Harrison studied their papers carefully. "Everything appears legitimate, though rumors from downriver mention pursuit of runaway property. Perhaps you encountered suspicious characters." James intervened smoothly. "We encountered many travelers, none matching official descriptions of wanted criminals. Our expedition maintains records of all encounters, if you'd like to review them." Eliza understood the performance. By offering transparency, they challenged examination while appearing cooperative. The lieutenant's request might expose his true intentions. "The lady maintains records, I presume?" The lieutenant gestured toward Eliza, tone testing boundaries. "Our accountant documents all transactions and encounters," Don Carlos confirmed. "Standard practice for legitimate commerce." Before the lieutenant could probe further, unexpected support arrived. The ferry operator, a weathered Greek man named Costas, emerged from his dock office. He'd known Don Carlos from previous crossings. "Morning delays ferry service," Costas interrupted apologetically. "River conditions demand immediate attention. Any military business must wait until crossing completes safely." The timing was fortuitous, providing excuse to end examination while maintaining appearance of cooperation. Lieutenant Harrison accepted the delay reluctantly, agreeing to conclude his survey elsewhere. "Smoothly handled," James murmured as the officers departed. "Truth makes strongest shield," Don Carlos replied. "When actions align with conscience, deception becomes unnecessary." They spent the rest of the day preparing for river crossing. 2 flat-bottomed ferries would carry expedition across in stages. Pack animals and heaviest cargo went first, established procedure that allowed testing current conditions before risking personnel. Eliza assisted with inventory, her organizational skills helping sequence loads for balance and safety. The process revealed how thoroughly her role had evolved. No one questioned her decisions about weight distribution or passenger arrangements. Competence had established authority more effectively than any declaration of rights. That evening, awaiting improved conditions, Don Carlos called final expedition meeting on Mexican soil. "Our journey reaches new phase tomorrow. Some continue to Santa Fe, others to California goldfields, a few to Oregon territories. He looked meaningfully at James and Eliza. I release all from Mexican service with highest recommendations. Papers document your contributions honestly. Use them wisely. The formal discharge carried weight beyond mere words. With Mexican documentation proving legitimate employment, Eliza possessed protection against slave catchers targeting undocumented travelers. James had already prepared California papers listing her as his business partner, another layer of legal identity. Through careful orchestration of official recognition, they'd transformed vulnerability into strength. Papers proved worth more than weapons in civilized society. After dinner, as stars emerged above desert sky, Eliza joined James for final planning session. Tomorrow brought separation from expeditions protection. They would continue west alone, carrying knowledge gained through shared trials. Nervous? James asked, noting her thoughtful silence. Contemplative. 2 months ago, freedom seemed impossible dream. Now it feels like foundation for building something better. What exactly? Purpose? She gestured at ledger and starlit a landscape. These weeks taught me that survival creates its own meaning. When you preserve something precious, whether life or liberty, you earn responsibility to use it well. James nodded, understanding. The frontier forces growth. Every challenge conquered prepares you for the next. They discussed practical concerns, routes beyond the Rio Grande, trusted contacts in Los Angeles, potential employment opportunities. James had connections with shipping companies needing educated translators and accountants. The gold rush created demand for financial expertise that transcended social prejudices. Though prejudice never disappears entirely, James cautioned, California might offer more freedom than Louisiana, but human nature travels westward too. I've discovered something about human nature, Eliza reflected. It adapts surprisingly well to necessity. When survival depends on cooperation, differences become irrelevant quickly. The night deepened as they made detailed preparations. Maps were studied, supplies inventoried again, route decisions finalized. Each choice represented commitment to future rather than escape from past. Dawn brought somber clarity. The Rio Grande flowed brown and swift, carrying spring runoff from distant mountains. Costa's confirmed conditions remained challenging, but manageable for experienced crew. Ladies cross last, he announced in heavily accented English. Children and women go with experienced hands, safest configuration. The crossing began with military precision. First ferry-loaded pack animals and cargo, experienced riders managing. Frightened horses as flat-bottomed craft fought current. Eliza watched from shore, calculating risks and possibilities. Her turn came mid-morning. James remained beside her as they boarded the second ferry with remaining expedition members. The platform rocked alarmingly as poling crew fought to maintain. Heading against persistent current, water churned mere inches from deck edge. The river seemed determined to challenge their passage, as if testing resolve of those who dared cross into unknown future. Eliza found herself drawing strength from lessons learned. The same courage that faced auction blocks and Apache councils now steadied her for nature's trial. Hold center, James advised quietly. Trust those doing the work. His calmness proved infectious. As ferry pushed into main current, fear transformed into exhilaration. The crossing became metaphor realized, leaving known shores for uncertain dreams, powered by human determination against natural resistance. Midstream, disaster threatened. A submerged log struck ferry's side, causing violent shudder. Passengers instinctively shifted weight, nearly capsizing the craft. Only Costas's shouted commands prevented catastrophe. In that critical moment, Eliza acted without hesitation. She'd observed weight distribution principles, knew immediate counterbalancing was essential. Moving decisively to opposite rail, she called others to follow. Within seconds, equilibrium restored. "You saved us," a vaquero acknowledged, genuine respect replacing previous wariness. "We saved ourselves," she corrected, indicating collective effort. "Survival requires everyone." The remainder of crossing proceeded less dramatically. As Mexican shore receded and California coast appeared, Eliza experienced profound shift in perspective. She'd crossed more than river. She'd traversed from property to person, from victim to participant in her own destiny. Disembarking involved chaos of reuniting supplies and animals. Don Carlos supervised final organization with characteristic efficiency. When everything was settled, he assembled his people for formal farewell. "Our paths diverge here. Each carries memories of shared trials, lessons of frontier survival." He looked directly at Eliza. "You joined us as expedition accountant. You depart as proof that courage writes better stories than circumstance." The Mexican Don bestowed each departing member with gifts, traditional silver coins stamped with personal blessing. To Eliza, he added special provision. "This letter introduces you to respected colleagues in California settlements. Your skills deserve recognition beyond prejudice." Similar farewells followed. Vaqueros shared hard-won trail wisdom. Guards offered weapons guidance. Even taciturn scouts exchanged parting knowledge about territorial navigation. As Don Carlos's party turned eastward toward Santa Fe, James and Eliza faced west alone. Two figures on the vast American landscape, carrying nothing but horses, supplies, and determination forged through shared experience. "Strange feeling," Eliza admitted, watching the expedition dust disappear, "like leaving family." "Frontier family," James clarified. "Bonds formed through necessity tend to outlast those of blood." They rode slowly that first day alone, adjusting to changed dynamics. Without expedition's protective numbers, vulnerabilities returned. But now they possessed knowledge to address them, understanding of terrain, people, and surviving beyond society's formal boundaries. Desert heat intensified by afternoon. They sought shade beneath ancient cottonwood grove marking underground. Spring. Rest provided opportunity for serious discussion about their partnership's future. "California creates its own myths," James began. "Gold draws dreamers and predators equally. We'll need clear understanding about continuing together." "Do you suggest separation?" The possibility hadn't occurred to her. Despite their arrangement's practical origins, genuine partnership had emerged. "I suggest honesty about expectations." James removed his hat, running fingers through silver-streaked hair. "Freedom means choosing companions, not accepting circumstances. We've crossed significant distances together. Time to decide if we continue the journey or merely shared the trail." The distinction struck powerfully. These months had contained more intensely lived experience than years in slavery's monotony. Shared danger had created familiarity that might not translate to settled life's rhythms. "What would California partnership look like?" she asked directly. "Business venture initially. Your accounting skills, my connections, both our understanding of frontier opportunities. Beyond that." He hesitated. "Friendship earned through trust rather than proclaimed through sentiment." His answer carried weight of consideration rather than assumptions. In frontier society, relationships required constant negotiation rather than prescribed roles. Freedom included choosing the terms of every association. "Then I choose partnership," Eliza declared, "but understand I'll never be property again, even willingly assumed. Nor would I ask it. Partnership means equality in risk and reward." They shook hands formally, sealing commitment beyond circumstantial alliance. The gesture marked transformation from rescuer saved to partners freely choosing shared purpose. Afternoon travel brought new landscapes. Desert still dominated, but hints of maritime influence emerged. Different vegetation, salt tang in distant air, bird species suggesting proximity to ocean. California's mythical abundance remained hidden beyond mountains, but evidence of its pull drew travelers westward like magnetic north. Evening found them establishing camp in protective arroyo. Routine tasks proceeded differently now, deliberate actions by partners rather than coordinated survival. Even simple decisions like fire placement sparked discussion rather than assumption. Different terrain requires different tactics, James observed, sketching defensive positions in dirt. Desert warfare differs from plains fighting. Apache knowledge serves partially, but local wisdom proves essential. Where do we gather such wisdom? Eliza asked, reviewing their increasingly precise maps. Trading posts, military outposts, Mexican settlements. California's populated sparsely but strategically. Each settlement teaches regional adaptation. As they shared evening meal, conversation ranged across philosophy and practicality. Frontier demanded both, understanding survival principles, while maintaining purpose beyond mere existence. I've observed something since crossing, Eliza offered. Freedom creates responsibility rather than relieving it. Slavery removed choices. Liberty demands, making them constantly. Burden of paradise, James agreed. Every advantage brings corresponding challenge. They slept that night as equals for the first time, two free people choosing proximity, rather than circumstance enforcing it. The subtle shift carried profound implications for identity and future. Dawn revealed visitors again, not pursuers this time, but fellow travelers. A small wagon train bound for Los Angeles had camped nearby. Overnight, their leader, a robust German immigrant named Mueller, approached cautiously. "Peaceful morning," Mueller offered standard frontier greeting. "You head to California settlements?" "Los Angeles initially," James confirmed. "Then following opportunities. North. Perhaps we travel together. Our train includes families. Having experienced scout improves everyone's safety." The request highlighted their transformed status. No longer fugitives avoiding attention, they were potential assets to other travelers. James consulted Eliza before responding. Partnership required shared decisions. "We accept," they answered simultaneously, then shared slight smile at matched response. Joining wagon train proved enlightening. 5 families plus individual fortune seekers created mobile community distinct from military expedition. Children's presence changed dynamics completely. Safety considerations intensified when innocent lives depended on adult wisdom. "Frontier demands strange sacrifices," confided Frau Müller, the leader's wife. She'd noticed Eliza's mixed features and unconventional circumstances. "I was schoolteacher in Hamburg. Here I defend camp perimeter with rifle, while husband scouts." "Adaptation defines frontier life," Eliza agreed, finding kinship with another educated woman, adjusting to primal realities. As wagons organized for departure, James was offered official scout position. The appointment carried respect and responsibility. Lives now depended on his knowledge beyond their immediate partnership. "I trust your judgment," Eliza assured him privately. "This train offers protection without obligation. We can depart whenever California presents better opportunities." Their integration proceeded smoothly. Wagon train movement differed from expeditions' focused efficiency. Family needs dictated rhythm, children's safety, medical concerns, community cohesion. Yet this slower pace revealed landscape details missed during rapid travel. Crossing into California proper took 3 additional days. The wagon train celebrated with evening feast, combining various cultural traditions into frontier fusion. German songs mingled with Mexican melodies. Children played games transcending language barriers. Eliza contributed by organizing provisions fairly, ensuring each family received proper ratios despite differing numbers and needs. Her skills earned gratitude that transcended social barriers. When former prejudices surfaced occasionally, practical necessity overruled sentiment. Progress appears slowly, observed Mr. Peterson, a stoic Norwegian farmer. After sunset, all capable hands defend regardless of origin. Morning brings amnesty for night's necessity. The poetic observation captured frontier truth, survival, created temporary equality that might eventually become permanent transformation. James excelled in his scout duties, establishing himself as indispensable. His careful navigation saved them from flash floods, directed them to reliable water sources, and negotiated safe passage through contested territorial boundaries. One evening, he sought Eliza privately. Muller offered permanent position leading supply trains between Los Angeles and San Francisco. Good wages, immediate respectability. And you'd accept? Depends on understanding our arrangement's permanence. The question demanded total honesty. Their partnership had succeeded through mutual benefit and growing respect. But California presented choices unimaginable months earlier. I value what we've built, Eliza began carefully. You offered freedom when hope seemed finished. Together, we've proven that capability matters more than circumstance. But complete independence means freedom to choose any path, even separate ones. I need to discover whether I can succeed entirely alone before choosing voluntary partnership. James nodded understanding. Fair assessment. Perhaps California allows us both to prove individual worth before determining shared future. The conversation ended without resolution, appropriately for frontier life, where conclusiveness often meant vulnerability. They continued with wagon train, deferring decisions until civilization's relative security allowed contemplation. Entering, settled California regions brought cultural shock. Coastal settlements showed Spanish colonial influence modified by American adaptation. Architecture mixed styles as freely as populations mixed heritage. Here, Eliza discovered communities where her mixed features and educated background attracted opportunity rather than suspicion. Los Angeles appeared as a sprawling collection of adobe buildings and rough-hewn lumber constructions. The Pueblo maintained Mexican character, while American enterprise established parallel commerce. Gold rush fever infected the atmosphere, drawing ambitious souls westward toward greater fortunes. Muller arranged final business at Settlement Edge, preparing supply lists for return journey. James finalized his commitment to permanent scout position while helping Eliza establish independent accounting practice. Senora Rodriguez runs boarding house on Plaza District, James explained, introducing trusted contact. She needs bookkeeper for expanding enterprise. Beginning allows developing reputation safely. Senora Rodriguez proved perfect employer. The shrewd businesswoman, appreciating Eliza's skills while providing protective environment. The boarding house catered to respectable travelers, creating community focused on prosperity rather than prejudice. You learn quickly our ways, Senora Rodriguez observed after first week. This California makes new rules for new people. Old. Society dissolves like morning fog. The metaphor proved accurate. Cultural barriers remained, but flexed under economic pressure. Gold created its own democracy, valuing capability over ancestry. James maintained connection through regular visits between expeditions. Their relationship evolved into something unprecedented. Not romance, not mere friendship, but partnership transcending traditional categories. They'd saved each other repeatedly, discovered strength through cooperation, built trust through shared trials. Transformation continues. James noted during one evening discussion, They'd adopted tradition of shared meals when his schedule permitted. 3 months passed, you stood on auction block. Now you manage finances for California's newest enterprises. And you've evolved from mysterious rescuer to respected trail guide, she reflected. Perhaps redemption requires we become different, people than circumstances made us. Or perhaps we become who we truly are when given genuine choices. Their philosophical discussions deepened with stability's foundation. Freedom allowed exploration of identity beyond survival's demands. Eliza began teaching literacy to boarding house children, sharing education that had been weapon for dignity's preservation. James pioneered new trail routes, mapping territories previously considered impassable. His growing reputation attracted offers from shipping companies eager to expand Pacific commerce. One evening, 6 months after their arrival, they walked Los Angeles' moonlit streets, contemplating achievements neither could have imagined. Liberty exceeds freedom, Eliza observed. Freedom breaks chains. Liberty builds better worlds. And we've participated in both, James agreed. Destruction and creation require equal courage. Their conversation was interrupted by commotion from Central Plaza. A newcomer had arrived bearing newspaper from distant states, news that forever altered their perspective on personal freedom's larger context. War between states begins, the messenger announced dramatically. Southern rebellion challenges Union authority over slavery's future. The proclamation resonated powerfully. Their individual escape had connected to larger struggles for human dignity. While they'd pursued personal liberty, nations prepared to determine freedom's definition through force. Our story matters more now, James understood immediately. Every success proves slavery's lies about human capability. Then we continue proving, Eliza declared, not just for ourselves, but for every soul still fighting for first breath of freedom. The news crystallized their purpose. They would build exemplary lives demonstrating slavery's moral and economic falsehood. Success became legacy rather than personal achievement. As they returned to boarding house, Eliza felt transformation complete. The auction block girl had become business owner. The mysterious cowboy had become respected guide. Together, they embodied Frontier's greatest promise, that courage could reshape destiny. The Pacific surf crashed against distant cliffs, rhythmic, reminder of persistence's power. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove freedom's worth. But tonight, under California stars, two souls who'd chosen partnership over isolation celebrated transformation earned through trials shared and overcome. Their journey had concluded at ocean's edge, yet simultaneously begun anew. The frontier continued westward in spirit, if not geography. Every dawn offered chances to expand liberty's territory within human hearts. Standing at boarding house threshold, Eliza touched James's arm gratefully. Thank you for believing a woman on auction block deserved more than circumstance intended. Thank you for proving dignity survives conditions meant to destroy it, he responded. Your strength inspired my own transformation. They understood finally. Rescue had become mutual. Two broken souls had found wholeness through shared commitment to freedom's promise. Their story would echo beyond personal boundaries, inspiring others to challenge fate's apparent inevitability. As they parted for night's rest, both carried knowledge that tomorrow held purpose beyond mere survival. They would continue building, lives worthy of freedom's price, adventure transformed into meaningful existence, escape refined into purposeful belonging. The mysterious cowboy's $1,000 gamble had purchased more than slave girls' liberty. It had invested in human potential's unlimited returns. And that investment, carefully tended through courage and wisdom, would yield dividends beyond any auction block's imagination. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.